Tom, you're up next.
Good morning. No pizza jokes, no chicken jokes. I don't have a 5-year-old. That I know of. So glad our museum isn't real, it's virtual, which means we have no dusting, which is really handy. And we're working from what I call an overlooked overlap. My name's Tom Trimbath. I'm project manager of HCLE, which is the history of computing and learning and education. And the length of that title makes it interesting to tweet, if nothing else, but it also gets into the strategies that we've had to develop for our virtual museum. We're an overlooked overlap. There are 3 different things mentioned in our title. History of education. There's computing. There's computers. Well, history of education is one thing. It's dioramas. It's something that's been around with us as long as we've been a society, as long as we've been a species that's been able to talk. History of computing is really the software side of things. It's the games are the most common thing, and that folks actually want to go back to. Not many folks want to go back and use Microsoft Word 1.0, but they're happy to go back and play Pong. And then the history of computers, which is, if you get a chance, next month's AAM meeting, there's a tour of the Living Computer Museum, and you can see that the history of computers, for one thing, is very short, just like the history of computing, and that it has been going through phenomenal changes where there were computers the size of this room, and now the cell phone that you have in your pocket has more power than those, and they actually have incorporated that all into one exhibit, and it's pretty impressive. We sit in the middle. We're in that overlap between those 3. We're talking about how computers and computing changed the way education and learning happened. So we're crossing 3 really big topics and trying to sit in the middle and trying to cover what really hasn't been covered, which has forced us into a strategy. Because if you're doing a big topic, if you're doing art, if you're doing science, if you're doing computers, you can find folks that are just passionate about that one thing, which is really handy because that means that you have a lot of folks you can go out and find support from, even if it isn't just funding, if it is emotional, if it is public relations, that sort of thing. Start to narrow it down, it gets to be harder. There's fewer folks that are going to be worrying and interested and passionate about that segment. You get to a history of computing and education and learning, and all of a sudden you've got a very small subset to be working from. Of course, that very small subset knows that they're small, and they become that much more passionate as a result. Now that's about us, but what it gets into is a strategy that can apply to anybody that's trying to do anything collaborative, and that's what we're going to be talking about. We take that disadvantage and we've been turning it into an advantage. If we had tried to put together a museum that covered the hardware and the software and the education, I'd have a job for the next 3 lifetimes. It's too hard to do that. So what we're doing is as much collaboration as we possibly can, and we're finding this is really powerful, and it's wonderful, and it's an awful lot of work. What we're doing is we're taking those elements and instead of trying to own everything, we're trying to actually give up ownership, but then maintain some sort of control and some kind of relationship. But we can't do that with everything. There's always going to be something that you couldn't give up. There's going to be something nobody else cares about. And that remainder is something that we have to focus on, and that's something that we have to take care of. So we're that little blue place there in the middle. It's so easy to have that overlooked because, for instance, the history of computers, they're going to be really focused on that hardware and how do you maintain that hardware. And as you get further and further away from your core mission of your museum, as you get out to the fringes, you may be running out of money, you may be running out of resources, time, whatever. What we're finding, though, is by being in that middle, by stewarding that center and saying, hey, look, here's a topic over here that you may not be considering, and by pointing out that there's somebody else out here that's interested in it, instead of that interest dying off as you get near the edges, we help prop it back up again. And this gives them an opportunity then to come out there with a different type of exhibit, a different type of reasoning for funding, a different insight into what their own museum has been doing. It's not that easy, though. It is compromise, it is an awful lot of communication, it is an awful lot of giving up control. And at the very same time, knowing what parts of that control you also have to just very rigorously stand with and make sure you hang on to. And actually, that's an interesting exercise to be going through, because you really have to question that core strategy, that core goal, that core mission. So we're lucky. We've been able to make our virtual museum available to education museums. We can let the hardware go off to the computer museums. This is really handy, because maintaining computer hardware, how many folks were in the Google Glass meeting yesterday, where the Google Glass had some interruptions, the Windows machine had some interruptions? Can you imagine running a museum where you have to worry about that every single day? We don't want to have to worry about that. Living Computer Museum and folks like that, we're happy to work with them. Software, we're going off and using folks like, for instance, Internet Archives is being nice enough to actually host some of the software we're going to be uploading, like the games and that sort of thing. And then the emulators, fill in the blanks. And then what we do is we make sure that we sit in the middle and we digitize what we have, and we catalog it and we curate it. And we do it in a way so that it's open source, so that everybody has a chance to recognize the software. We're not having to give them anything proprietary, but that also means we have to convince them or work with them so that they're using the same sort of standards. And then what we hope to do is provide access to the scholars and the public through developing a digital repository that is distributed out through all these folks. We have a catalog that has to speak all these various languages, funnel it through our virtual museum, which we just have to put up online, and then go out to a different series of users, which means a different series of interfaces, which is yet another task. But it's all doable because we're collaborating with other universities, museums, and that sort of thing. And with that, I'll encourage you to go out to our wiki, which we call the digital loading dock. The website is not up yet. We are at the stage where a lot of these museums started, 1 or 2 people. Our founder, Eliza Loop, is sitting here in the front. I'm the project director. Welcome to the entire staff of the History of Computing and Learning and Education, and we're tired. So I welcome you to come out to the wiki, take a look at what's going on, and contact us if you have any other questions.